Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on transitioning to Google Analytics 4. I'm just going to give it another couple of seconds, maybe a minute or two, just to allow people to join in on LinkedIn. Just to encourage you as well that we will be having a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, and do feel free to leave any comments and we'll get back to them at the end of the event today. We are live streaming this onto various platforms with LinkedIn, and as part of that today, we will have some slight delays in that, so we're coming through the sound, just testing things as we go, but do leave any comments for us and we will return to those at the end as well. This webinar is brought to you by ProfileTree. ProfileTree are a digital marketing agency based in Belfast. Our main focus is search engine optimization, web design, and digital support online, with a primary goal around training and online providing solutions. My name is Stephen McClelland. I'm a digital strategist here at ProfileTree. In this webinar, we will be going through transitioning to Google Analytics 4. Excellent. So we'll make a start on our presentation today, which is surrounding transitioning to Google Analytics 4 for your business. I just want to thank you for joining us alongside us as well, but also if you're watching any recordings or aftermath from this presentation today. As I said, my name is Stephen McClelland. I'm a digital strategist here at ProfileTree, and my main focus is providing guidance and strategic planning around using analytics for your business. But most importantly, if you're already or not already using analytics, why you should be using it, and most importantly, why you should be transitioning correctly or the right way to GA4. Now, as part of this webinar, we want to go in a bit more into a bit of an introduction into what GA4 actually is, how it can be used for your business, and also, if we can, and the joys of webinars and the joys of technology, and we will also try and make this as a practical session as possible so that we can actually get into analytics itself, look at the actual migration process, and also then start to look at how you and your business can use Google Analytics 4 for your own understanding. So what we'll do, we'll make a start by looking at a quick introduction into GA4 and what does that actually look like for your business. So hopefully by joining us today, you have some understanding of what Google Analytics actually is. Possibly you were using Universal Analytics or GA3 as it was referred to previously. And as part of that, we want to encourage you to make that switch over to GA4. But before we do that, we want to understand what is the difference, what is GA4, what is Google Analytics 4. So as a quick summary introduction for you, the first thing we want to consider is that GA4 is the latest iteration of Google Analytics. It came out just over 12 months ago and is forcefully being phased in the next couple of weeks and months. And I'm sure you're all seeing by now that there's a very strong prompt towards the 1st of July deadline, or the cutoff, which we'll come back to, and we'll get into that in more detail. But to summarize, first of all, what is GA4? Well, GA4, as I mentioned, is the latest iteration. Now, when we talk about iteration, GA4 isn't just the next continuation. It's not just a quick update with a fresh coat of paint. This is a brand new data model. And that's big for a couple of things. Number one is how the data is captured and stored. Due to GDPR compliance, privacy policy, Google has had to change the data that they collect and how they handle the data. And as a result of this, on the 1st of July this year, we will be moved to GA4. Universal Analytics will stop tracking, or GA3. So you might see different references throughout this webinar to UA or GA3, the previous version. And that data will stop processing from the 1st of July. That means for anyone that's still using Universal Analytics, that data will stop being collected. And as a result, you will either be forced to GA4 if Google hasn't already auto-migrated you, or you will have to make the move yourself. Now, as part of this new data model, the previous data, you will have to either export that to a third party, or you can take it to one of Google's own services. Now, for those that don't remove or collect that data, Google is saying at the moment anywhere in the region of around 12 months, they will hold on to that data after they stop processing. From then onwards, it will most likely be lost. So do keep that in mind. But as part of that big change, this new data model is much more compliant for data protection, security, as I mentioned, and privacy. But one of the big things for us as marketeers and analysts is that it's built exclusively on events and parameters. That means the detail and the data that's accessible to you is much more broader than before, and allows you to really bring down the details in your reporting. And we're going to have a look at some of those details today and some of that custom options that you can use within GA4. Another big advancement for this new data model is the integration or the potential support of machine learning technology. We all know about ChatGPT, we know about AI. I couldn't help myself but mentioning ChatGPT on another call. But machine learning, artificial intelligence is highly on the horizon. It's coming to everything that we do. Now, Universal Analytics has been bringing in insights for some time now, and they've been testing this. For insights is that question that you would ask, a marketeer or an agency. You would say, what was our top performing page over the last 6 weeks, or what page retained the most conversion. Well, machine learning insights is going to be coming out to GA4, and it's going to become smarter and it's become more advanced. It is going to hopefully help us understand the key points or the data that we're looking for at a glance. And then some other key benefits is GA4 has a much better comprehension of understanding user journeys across different devices and platforms. We're going to talk about path exploration later on, where we'll actually be able to show you that transaction across different devices from web to mobile and smartphone applications. From there, then we have a much better measurement capability for detailed analysis. So again, I'll show you a nice presentation that I've seen online before, and I thought it was good to reference, and that's the differences between Universal Analytics and GA4. But of course, with that, we also then have much better integrated services with the Google platform. So when it comes to Google Ads, Google, the YouTube space, we have Google Signals, and that's going to really help us integrate our all-around marketing strategy for return on investment. So that's just a bit of an introduction, but what's a way to summarize the differences between Universal Analytics and GA4? I have to credit Luke Carthy on this, another SEO analyst online. I thought this was an excellent example. The best way to explain the difference between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4 is almost like a meal preparation service. So something like we have here in the UK, we have a box providing service like HelloFresh. And the idea behind this is HelloFresh is pre-packaged. You have your recipe card, you've got your ingredients, it's all put together there for you. And if we consider that to our Universal Analytics, when we open our dashboard, we have all our reports, we have our views, we have our conversion tracking, all within very clean, pre-fixed, pre-made dashboards. Now, GA4 has elements of that. However, almost like going into a supermarket or a grocery store, all the ingredients are there, all the data is there, all the food choices, anything you want to make is pretty much going to be there. It's almost limitless depending on what the store has in stock, so to speak. Same thing with GA4. The data is all there. Now, it may not always come in pre-packaged, pre-box scenarios where you've got all the views already set up. And that's one of the biggest frustrations that a lot of marketeers or even small business owners have when they made the move to GA4. They went into the account and they're going, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Where's all my views? Where's my conversion tracking? Or how does events work? And that was a big challenge that came up when GA4 came in. And it's almost been that fear that this is coming, and we're joining webinars to find out before it's too late. And we're getting on to our providers to help us out with understanding what GA4 is. But the biggest way to explain it is GA4 has much more power and performance under the hood. It's got much more data, and it refers to these as parameters. We'll get into that as well. It refers to these parameters in more detail, but it's open to you. And it's almost this idea of looking at who is GA4 versus Analytics targeted for. And in a way, what's really changed is Universal Analytics was what felt to be more, it was targeted towards marketeers. It was felt it was targeted towards small businesses, medium businesses, to try and understand the data and kind of take what was there. GA4 feels much more oriented towards analysts, the idea that you have all the data, it's about up to you how you use and understand that data, whether you create reports, you run path explorations, or you run comparison graphs. So it's really looking at the opportunities that are available for you as a small business or a medium-sized business to take that data and understand it. That's a big part of today's webinar, is hopefully when we get to the practical parts, is understanding how that data can be used. So when we look at what's changed, there's a few things we want to be aware of. There's a few things to note. Number one is GA4 tracks multiple conversion events per user. Now, this is something you might not have even noticed before, but if you think about your tracking, if you think about how you were running events in Universal Analytics previously, this is something that's really important. So an example here would be if I come onto your website and let's say you are a service, maybe a human resources consultancy, so we'll go for that as the example, and your call to action, your event that you want to track someone go through on your website is a form. Maybe it's an inquiry form or book a consultation form. Well, on Universal Analytics, whenever someone went onto your website, it measured what's called hits. So if I opened a page and I viewed that page, that was hit page view. And if I scrolled down the page and if I then clicked on maybe your newsletter and I filled out the newsletter and I was tracking that conversion or tracking that event, that would track as a conversion. Now, within that same setting, so within that same kind of period, if I then went to your book a free consultation inquiry form and filled out the inquiry form, and that was the last thing that I did, that would actually be the only event that would convert. It wouldn't actually track the newsletter sign up, or if I followed you on social media and I was tracking for those click button presses, it wouldn't actually show as a conversion. GA4 now tracks multiple conversion events per user, meaning that I could go onto your website, scroll to the bottom, fill out the newsletter, click and fill out that newsletter. That would then track as conversion, and that would be stored in their conversion tracking. And in that same session, do the same thing, go on to the consultation form, fill out another consultation form. And again, that would be tracked as a second conversion. So that means that data is going to be much more accurate, and it's a really powerful difference to know right out of the box. Speaking of out of the box, then we have much more insightful data. Now, this is referred to as event tracking. A big thing for me personally, whenever I started to get into Google Analytics and GA3 or Universal Analytics, was understanding tracking and conversion measurement. Understanding that it's not just about looking at what's the top performing pages, where was the source of the traffic, where do we get it from, but it's actually about what are people doing on our website. If we're selling a service, if we're selling a product, are people actually scrolling to the bottom? Are we finding faults or flaws in our websites? Search bars, for instance, not being used. And we'll talk about some of these examples later on. But one of the things that you get out of the box with GA4 is a tool called enhanced measurement. And again, we're going to show you how to set this up when it comes through to setting up your own account. But it's really important to have some of these features enabled so that we can understand our user activity and how they're engaging. And that keyword there is engaging. And we'll talk about that as well, how they're engaging with our audience. From there, then we have, again, much more powerful tools to track, and that can be things that we've had before, but we had to go to third-party tools. We had to use things like Google Tag Manager. We had to use third-party tracking software. So now, again, GA4 is going to come with more options, more powerful tools at our disposal that we can create and run reports off. From there, then we have much more detail, and this is a big one. Again, you'll see the ability to create custom reports, and this allows us, again, to really fine-tune that process and how we want to obviously track that information. And then finally, cross-domain traffic. Now, for anyone that either has possibly a brochure website and they have a shop or a store, and anyone who's ever tried to go through the Universal Analytics cross-domain tracking before, it's pretty tough. It's hard to do, and there's a lot of configuration steps you need to actually configure. Now, with data streams, this is much easier to do when it comes to cross-domain tracking, or even tracking alongside a mobile or smartphone application for iOS or Android. So a much more easy, much more accessible platform to actually set up that cross-domain tracking. So again, to summarize the key differences, I tried to pick out just 3 points that I think is important for to take away from this today, so you're aware. Keep those in the back of your mind. Number one, data retention. Again, in line with GDPR policy within the EU, and one of the things we need to consider is how long that data can be tracked and stored. Now, this is something to note right out of the box. On GA3 and Universal Analytics, your average timeline, and you could extend this, by the way, so you could set it to limitless or unlimited, and it would never expire, but data retention average was 26 months. Now, I don't know many businesses that would want to go back anything further than 12 months anyway, so this might not be a concern, but it's something that you do want to consider. You just need to think about, right, we might need to bring in a third party, we might need to use some software to actually extract our information, because GA4, the maximum you can actually set is 14 months. So again, I think in a real world scenario, if you're looking at your marketing, if you're running your sales retention, the biggest kind of gap that you want to look for normally is the last 12 months. How are we doing this time last year? And how are we doing the last 6 months? So that data is going to be there. Now, when we talk about data retention in GA4 or even in Universal Analytics, we don't just mean that after 14 months, everything's gone. We don't have page views. We don't have tracking behavior. We don't have engagements. There is still a level of information that's there. We're still going to see the top performing pages. We're going to get page views, but it's the more granular level detail then gets removed from the servers. So the likes of, it's really about behavior, engagement time, and it'll be looking at sessions, user ID. These are more advanced things. Again, if it's something comes up later, we can have a look at a more advanced webinar. But in GA4, that data will no longer be there after 14 months. So something just to keep in mind. Another big one as well, and I'll be referencing this quite a lot today for some of our demos, is the data update time. Previously on Universal Analytics, you could have added an event or made a few changes on your websites, and you would have seen that data reflected fairly quickly, normally at least within 24 hours. So far, and again, this is subject to change, at the moment it seems to be taking around 48 hours or so. So about 2 days or so we've noticed to make some of those changes. So again, if we've added an event, sometimes you're going the next morning, you expect it to be up and ready and tracking conversions, and you're still not seeing those coming in yet. So that's something to note, that it can take a wee bit longer. One of the biggest differences, and I suppose my terminology here, I need to be careful of saying replaced. Every time you opened your dashboard before, the first thing that Google would show you was page views, sessions, first visit, and things then like bounce rate. And this is where Google's trying to change that terminology. They're trying to focus more on not so much how quickly people are arriving onto your website and then bouncing off or leaving, but what they're actually doing. Are they engaging in the website? Are they staying on? Are they scrolling down? Are they clicking on various elements? Are they filling out forms? And engagement time is now going to be the key metric instead of bounce rate. Bounce rate is still possible. You can still get bounce rate within the dashboards, within the planning. However, engagement time or engagement rate is going to be the new key metric that we will look for. And this makes a lot of sense because, again, SEO enthusiasts and analysts always would have talked about bounce rate, but they've never been able to kind of work out exactly the reason. They're always kind of spitballing around different ideas. Engagement rate, engagement time makes much more sense when it comes to that process. So engagement time we will get into, but how is engagement time measured? What's the engagement rate measurement unit? Well, there's actually 3 core engagement rate metrics. And it's not, you don't have to fit every one of these categories. So the first metric is anything longer than 10 seconds. So if I've loaded your web page, if I've opened your home page and I've spent more than 10 seconds looking at your home page, that will count as an engagement conversion or engagement time on the screen. We then have any conversion event. So if I open your website and I go straight to a contact form and I fill out that contact form, that will also count as engagement rate. And then the final one is 2 or more pages. So if I go onto your website and I land on your homepage, I then go to your About Us, that will also count as engagement time. And the idea here is engagement time is just the inverse of bounce rate. And that's, again, important to note some of those references coming through. So hopefully now we can start to switch over and look at actually migrating to GA4. Now, for those, as I said, who are already using Universal Analytics, you will hopefully, or if you're not already seeing this, you'll probably see this. You'll see this big doomsday countdown from Google Analytics. So when it comes to making that move, making that transition to GA4, if you haven't already seen this, Google is highly promoting the Setup Assistant. Now, Google's Setup Assistant will also sometimes automatically move your data across. Now, it's really important to be aware of this. We're not saying outright that the auto migration is terrible and it'll ruin everything for you. But if your Universal Analytics is set up in such a way for event tracking, if you've got custom reports, if you've got custom audience groups, actually the Setup Assistant could be disastrous for you. And it's something you need to be very careful about doing. So what I would encourage you on the back of this webinar today, if you haven't already made that move to GA4 yet, is to get in, and we're going to go through the steps that I want you to follow today to make sure that you've set it up correctly. For those that have analytics, but they're never sure what to do with the old Universal Analytics, or maybe you've just never had analytics before. Maybe someone's asked you to join this webinar today just to find out more about Google Analytics 4 in general, or Google Analytics. Then this will hopefully be an also easy session for you to start. So, as I said, for those that have conversion tracking, events, custom audience groups, custom reports set up, you will 100% want to go through the steps that we're going to go into now, and that's using the Setup Assistant, but very carefully going through some of the more advanced settings. And again, for those that have analytics at the moment, don't really use it that much other than maybe tracking basic information, you will also be able to follow these steps as well. So out of the box, we could go straight in and click go to Setup Assistant. But I just want to show you, for those that don't get this alert or haven't seen this alert yet, we're going to hit no thanks. So this is currently looking at a demo website for one of our brands. And what we're going to look at in this demo is this is Universal Analytics. So this is GA3. Just as I'm sure you were maybe familiar with before. So we've got our homepage with our reporting here. We've got our traffic acquisition. We've got our sessions by country, our general overview. Again, there's the bounce rate, session duration, and then real-time activity. So this is kind of what people are used to. We switched this site over in the last month to GA4. And so what you can do to make that move or to make that first migration to GA4, you want to go to the admin panel located in the bottom left corner of your Google Analytics. So if we left click on admin, what we'll see here, we have our 3 tabs. We have our account, property, and view information. Now, this is where you will see at the top in the middle, GA4 Setup Assistant. And all we want to do is left click on GA4 Setup Assistant. Now you can, for reference, you can go in and create a property from scratch, create a brand new GA4 property. However, the Setup Assistant does just help connect these together. Now, for those that haven't already connected it, so for the purpose of a webinar and a live demonstration, sometimes it's a bit hard to do in real time, but if we get time in this webinar, we will do it with another brand. What we can do here is click connect to your GA4 property. For me, I've already connected it, so it's just going to give me a very simple option to go straight to that GA4 property. And what that will then do is open a new tab on your screen, and it will bring you through to the Setup Assistant. Now, again, for those that haven't already completed a GA4 migration, I'm just going to show you again how you would do this. So again, if you were on the home page under GA4 property, and this again is the GA4, don't worry, we'll come back to this and we'll talk about the layout. What we can then do is do the same thing, go to admin panel And again, at the top, we have the same option, set up assistant. Now, this is what Google is going to do automatically. So if you've got to the 1st of July and you forgot to do this, Google is automatically going to do these steps. But this is where things get important. And Google is only going to do that very basic migration. It's going to take the G tag or the code that was embedded into your previous website, and it's going to transition that over to GA4. Now, it is important to keep an eye on this because there's a lot of settings, there's a lot of code, especially if you're legacy, if you've got a Universal Analytics site from a long time ago, you might want to think about creating a new property just in case. Now, the big thing to note here, remember, is that the data that's coming over to GA4 is really just going to be what you've actually set up, like your events, your conversions. Remember, the page tracking, that information, that all has to start from scratch again. So you'll start to see that information going off. And remember, that's because of that new data model. It's not a case of it just suddenly moves everything over, and now you can look back 6 months on GA4 for what your old analytics was doing. It's completely different. So it's almost like starting from scratch. So the big thing to do is when you then open the assistant, you're going to see a series of sections. The first section here on most of your screens, you will see these as they're grayed out. These are just simple, almost check boxes. There is tools, there's guides you can use. You can see for the purpose of this, we've obviously marked these as all complete. But if we were to open a brand new GA4 migration that hasn't been done, these would all be marked as incomplete. And this is a good checklist to go through. Notorious amount of clients that we're speaking to, we go into their GA4 and we can see they haven't actually went through these steps. So the first thing we advise you to do is follow the setup assistant, go through the steps. So number 1 is collect website and app data. Now, this is important because this is what Google refers to as what's called the data stream. Now, again, for those who are using the setup assistant as we are now, we can simply click on action arrow and click on manage data streams. But for those that maybe aren't using the setup assistant and want to do this manually, you can also, again, go to your admin panel and you will see data streams here. Now, when we go into data streams, this is where we can add multiple streams for different types of devices. If we're using a website application, we could add our website in here. If we're using iOS or Android application, we can also add that in here as a new stream. Now, when we do that migration assistant, not the auto migration, but the migration assistant, Google will do that website stream for us. And you can see here, we have our Conley code GA4. So if we just left click anywhere in this space, you'll now see that we can see the web stream details. Now, this is where things start to get important. This is where the migration assistant will not help you and where you want to follow along with ourselves. So a few key things to note. Number 1, measurement ID is really important. For those of you that are using website builders or plugins, so tools like Shopify, WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, and many other website builders, they often will have plugins or they will have various apps that you can use to connect your website to GA4. Notoriously now, code is coming less and less, which is great for us that are non-techie, and we're able to obviously add these to the site. So many plugins will ask you for your measurement ID. And if you need to find measurement ID, you need to go to data streams, click on the data stream you're interested in. So in this case, the website, and you want to copy the measurement ID. And that's really important to know where that is because you might get asked for that depending on the application or the website builder or even the app that you use. So just keep that in mind. The next thing that we'll see on our screen is enhanced measurement. Now, you will remember this from my presentation before. Now, there's a gear cog here we can click on, which is configure enhanced measurement. What we can do within these settings is actually toggle, enable, or disable some of these apps. Now, straight away, most of these will be disabled. So whenever you open analytics for the first time or you open GA4 for the first time, the majority of these, other than page view, which is forced, will be disabled. So scrolls, and we'll go through these in just a second, scrolls, outbound links, site search, form interactions, etc. Those details will not be collected outside of GA4. They're turned off by default. So what we want you to do is actually enable all of them unless there's something that you find would not be convenient or suitable for your business for any reason. So in my preference, and if you're just getting familiar with GA4, I would enable all the enhanced measurement options. And again, the enhanced measurement options will just give you a bit more detail in understanding how GA4 can be used to its full potential. So the first thing you'll see is scrolls. Now, scrolls are an interaction whenever someone scrolls to 90% of the page height. So if I have a 2,000 word blog on like the Conley code, for example, well, what I can do here is I can set a scroll event to fire whenever the user scrolls 90% of that page. That will show me then which pages get the most engagement, especially what pages get the most engagement top to bottom. Now, this allows me then to understand, for instance, do I have a wonderful call to action located right at the bottom of that blog, but are only 20% of my users actually scrolling to the bottom, or the rest maybe getting a third, half of the way down, finding the information they came for the blog and then leaving the site. And so I'm able to track that. I can work out how many scroll conversions do we get, how people are actually reading our full content, or are they just reading half of it before they're leaving or going somewhere else. In relation to that, then I can also then see outbound clicks. So again, if I use a blog or I have a service and I've referenced another website, I want to track for cross-domain. I want to track for, no, sorry, not cross-domain. I want to track for external links. I want to see which sites am I sending the most traffic to. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. Number one, it could just be what links are the most active, what's getting the most engagement that are actually leaving the site, but also for potential referrals or affiliates. If I am a tourism or hospitality provider and I want to see what other businesses we're supporting, I can go back to them and I can say, actually, we've had 20% of our audience that read this article this month where actually we sent them to your website, and that could be a bit of a conversation there about striking up an arrangement. So there's options even for tracking the outbound clicks as well. And then what about site search? Site search is a massive one now for GA4. It's a big update in terms of what information you're able to see. And as part of this, site search will allow you to track what URLs are people searching for the most, what is the favorite information of your audience, and what are they doing on the site. This has had some really good examples online where businesses have been able to work out bugs or flaws in their website. And we'll hopefully have time to look at some of those examples later on, where we'll actually show you where sites, very reputable, well-known brands, have actually found problems with how many people are searching for a product and the wrong product appears in the search. And we can use GA4 to measure that. We then have form interactions. Now, I will flag just a disclaimer for this one. Form interactions at the moment, as far as we can see on GA4, are slightly inaccurate. Sometimes it's hard to work out what's actually going on there. We think Google is looking after this. But form interactions is tracking for two events. It's got form start and form submit. Now, what's happened here is that when someone starts a form, so let's say you have a contact form on your website that has a series of questions, first name, last name, address, phone number, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happens is whenever you start typing in the first field, Google will capture that as an event called form start. When you then get to the end of that form and you click submit, it will then track another event for event submit. Now, as far as where we're at the moment, we do believe that there's a small glitch in this where when someone fills out the last form, even before they hit submit, it tracks that final submit event. It's just something to flag if you are looking at resources online. Some people are saying turn this on, turn it off. Again, it's at your own discretion if you want to use it. I do recommend using it just so you've got that idea if you're not already tracking, but we will be able to look at more advanced custom methods of tracking later on as we go through, and that's looking at obviously form submissions, form engagement, things like that. So it's just a point to note there. The last two we have then are very simple, but they are video engagement and file downloads. So video engagement just simply looks at what is your audience doing with your videos, especially videos from YouTube or embedded from YouTube. So are they watching the full video? Are they watching a certain percentage? And you can again customize those events to be fired at certain intervals. So full watch, paused, 50% watch, and things like that. You can get that information from GA4. And then lastly, as you can see, downloadables. So are we offering a free download when you access our landing page? And are we able to track, are people actually downloading that PDF? Are they downloading that brochure from our website itself? So these are just some of the enhanced measurement units that Google will have out of the box. And I really encourage you to turn those on, unless for any reason you're already setting up custom events, which we will get into. Now, moving on down, then we have more custom settings where we have the ability to modify events and parameters. We're going to come back to those later. But in the interim, if you do have custom events or you've embedded or imported events from Universal Analytics, you will be able to modify those in here. Now, the reason for this is that Universal Analytics will track for category label, event action, and value. Those are the three metrics you would have used when you set up an event in Universal Analytics. GA4, on the other hand, is slightly different because it uses that different language model, but it also uses parameters. And so you need to effectively teach those or train those over. Again, if that's something you're interested in, do leave us a message on our social channels or reach out to us on our website, and we're more than happy to help you look at those custom events or modifying existing events that you've had. Some other settings that you can use, though, is to configure the tag settings. So a lot of our clients are asking us things like, how do we filter out traffic from our own staff, from our office? That's almost hidden in here. And so you need to go to Stream URL, and you'll see here from Google, configure tag settings. Now, when you click on configure tag settings, we have the ability now to click show all. And when we click on show all, here is where we have even more settings again. So again, for those that are wanting to look at cross-domain traffic and measurement, you can do that here through configuring your 2 or 3 of your domains. But for those that are wanting to possibly filter out maybe our office traffic, then we can go in here and we can define internal traffic to Google. And this will just allow us, in the same way we did before on Universal Analytics, to add our office or our home IP address, and that will then filter out those results, just so we're not going on our website ourselves 5 times a day, and our whole business and agency is as well, and everyone's obviously counting to the traffic. Another thing we can do is also list unwanted referrals. An example here is for those that use e-commerce, you might have Stripe or PayPal, and when someone goes out to the checkout and they make it successful or possibly a failed purchase, that redirect that you get from PayPal or Stripe often will count as a referral. And you might see, for instance, our referrals from PayPal are really high, and maybe you're wondering what's going on with there. Well, most commonly that will be someone goes through the checkout, they make a purchase, and then they're redirected back to the website. So you don't necessarily need to track that information as a referral source. So it's just some more information you can find out. Another thing you can also change here is the likes of your session timeout. Now, a session is measured in 30-minute intervals. So if I load your website for the first visit, so I get a first visit track, and then I stay on that website, and that will be a session. Now, as soon as I leave the website for more than 30 minutes, and I come back to the website after a 30-minute interval, it will then start another new session. Now, that's important. You can obviously be aware of that, but also then you can adjust it should you need to. So just some examples there of points to consider when it comes to setting up your GA4 account. So we're just close out of that, and we're just going to go back to the data stream that we were before. And that's our data stream. So that's almost the first big step of that migration. As I mentioned before, the purpose of me showing you that is that when you do the auto migration, or if Google does the auto migration for you, it is not going to enable those enhanced measurements that we looked at. It's not going to enable some of those extra features that we looked into, such as filtering. So it's important that you go through each of those steps at your own time and your own leisure to understand what you would like to use or what you want to use for the current time being. Some other settings that we can also look at is the likes of events and conversions. So for those that again have completed the migration, they've went through the setup assistant, and you've possibly imported your events over, you will see all your events in here. And this is where you can start to either create custom events, or you can modify existing events that have come over for Universal Analytics. Now, this is something we're going to come back to, but it is important to note where events are in here, because this allows you to mark them as conversions. So when events are fired, and by default, they will not be setting as converting to goals. So in the same way you would have set up goals and conversions before, it's similar in a way. You just need to mark your events as conversions. So whatever you want to track as a converting item, you can just tick the toggle here, and that will then show in the conversions table just below where you can see here form submit, and that's the conversion we're tracking. So this is just a bit of an insight into making that migration. Now, if you do have any questions, as I said, do leave them for the Q&A at the end, and we'll get back to your questions as soon as we can. But likewise, anything that we can't answer on today's call, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on our social media channels and on our website as well. So moving back then to how to actually use GA4, how to actually get into the dashboard, and trying to make things again a bit more practical if we can. What's different? So let's just do that now. So let's have a look at the GA4 dashboard. So what we're going to do when we get into our account, and I think I've just clicked on the Universal, so let me just go over to GA4. So we get into our GA4 account, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the home in the top left-hand corner. Now, previously on Universal Analytics, we would have had a series of different types of information. We would have had different tabs down the left-hand side, from user acquisition, traffic source, behavior, technology, and other different types of metrics. But when we look at GA4, you'll notice that the dashboard is much more refined. It's a lot slimmer when it comes to the information that's there. So if you see here, this is our example site, as I referenced before, so the Conley Cove site, and we can see again, even ourselves, we've only set up our GA4 conversion in the last 28 days, just for the purpose of this example. And so what we can see out of the box is we have the users, we have new users that are on the site, which again, most will be tracked as new users for the purpose of GA4. We have our event count, and then we have that engagement time that we referenced before. So again, treat those very similar to the likes of session duration and bounce rate as we're looking at engagement rates on the website itself. We then have a summary of real-time activity, so users that are on the website in the last 30 minutes or so. And then as we begin to scroll down, we have some recently adjusted events before we then go down to suggested for you. Now, at this stage, we'll see that the data is very streamlined. There's not a lot of information there. It's very refined, shall we say. And so what we're going to notice is the left-hand side, we have a series of options. Now, the two prominent options you're going to use on a regular basis is reports and explore. Now, reporting is where you will be most familiar with. Reporting is where you've got the likes of your snapshot is referred to, so that's your dashboard. And this is where we have the likes of our traffic acquisition, our user behavior, now engagement, monetization, device types, location, geographic, country. It's all here for you. It's slightly different. Some of the information is quite restricted, but the overall summary is we can see here how the data is actually performing. So if we start at the top and work our way down, we have the general overview again, just as we had in the same time as real time. If we then scroll down, we have the traffic channel. So this will be what source we're actually generating traffic from, or sorry, medium as it's referred to. And so medium will allow us to see the breakdown between organic, direct, pay-per-click, referral sources from social, and then unassigned. We then have obviously the sessions themselves. So again, the top perform campaigns, again, similar concept, as well as then the geographic location, so country. And just as we could before on Universal Analytics, you can click the likes of the link at the bottom. So in this case, view user acquisition, that will take you to a singular table. And from here, we can start to finesse that information. Now, one big thing to note is that when we're looking at tools like user acquisition, you might want to see a bigger breakdown. You might want to see what is the actual referral source, what are the channels coming through. Well, what we can do here, instead of going to views where we would have gone previously, we can now go to the search filter. And within here, we can change this. So just to explain, first of all, we have first user medium. First user medium is effectively the grouping that the audiences came from. So if it's organic, if it's referral, none will be, it's none could be assigned. So that's often referred to as direct. That's Google's way of saying it couldn't define where it actually came from. We also then have first user source, and source is starting to break down the actual specific examples. So in this case, Google search itself, Bing search, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, Facebook mobile application, Facebook tablet application, and Ecosia, and so on and so forth. So this allows you to start to see that breakdown. Now, it is important to be aware of this because it allows you to break it down by both source and medium. So you can start to see here the source itself. So again, the specific on the left-hand side, followed by the medium, which is the grouping it comes from. So the actual audience profile. So we can see again, organic results, organic, and you can start to see where the majority of your traffic is coming from. From this, we can then look at engagement rate, and we can start to see what is giving us the most engagement, what referrals are getting the most value in terms of our business. So if we look at the likes of Google and Yahoo, we can see that they're almost over a 50% conversion rate when it comes to engaging with our website. And then starting to break that down by looking at where we want them to reinvest our time, reinvest our efforts. Again, it's the same example as if we were running pay-per-click ads, be able to look at where that engagement is coming from to then see that, okay, yes, we're getting a lot of traffic from Google, but they're not engaging with our content. That might be that our content isn't helpful enough, we're not offering the right information, or simply we're not delivering enough content to give them that engagement chances. And likewise, then the same could be said for the likes of social media referrals. We're getting a lot of traffic from the likes of the Meta suite, so Instagram and Facebook. And again, what does that engagement look like within those platforms? This is just an example of how you can very quickly see just some of the data that's collected by Google and by the overall traffic acquisition usage. And we can do the same then for traffic acquisition. But what we're going to look at is a quick overview of events and see how events are being tracked in Google Analytics 4. So events are the biggest difference. They are 100% an area where I would encourage all of you to be looking at. Again, if you're using Universal Analytics at the moment, but you're not really using Universal Analytics and you have not set up events or goals before, this is the perfect time for you to make that move to GA4 and start to create even some of those enhanced measurement events where you can start to see some of the basics like scroll and form submissions that we looked at before. And that ability to understand not just the traffic and where it's coming from and what device or what page is it going to, but what pages are getting the most engagement, what pages are actually getting the clicks, they're getting the scrolls. So if we look at the overview page, well, again, we can see similar information to what we're used to seeing, user activity, and we can start to scroll down and we can look at some of those events taking place. So you can see here again, we get that page view, which is that, if someone goes on to 3 or 4 pages or refreshes a page, that'll count as a page view. Then we have that session start, that first visit, so the unique IP address, and then that user engagement. So again, remember that engagement measurement we talked about before, the 10 seconds, the 2 pages, or 1 conversion event. But from there, then we can have a look at the likes of scroll depth. We can look at click pages. We can look at search results. And you might be going, right, Stephen, that's great. It's good to see the engagement. It's good to see, the percentage of clicks and scrolls. But what pages are getting those? And this is where GA has changed. And we're going to have a look at a tab later on, which is the Explore tab. And this is where it's a love-hate relationship with GA4 at the moment. And I'm very confident that Google will be making changes and they'll be bringing more updates in. But at the moment, this is where I go back to that analogy of the HelloFresh box versus the supermarket. The idea that GA4 has all this data, it's all here, we can see it. But when it comes to the pre-packaged report and the view, you need to go and find the ingredients yourself. You need to put it all together. And that's what the Explore panel really looks like. And it's an amazing tool once you get into it and once you get using it and understand it. But up until then, it's very much a case of, okay, we've got the top level information. We've got the ingredients, so to speak. That's going to be the analogy I'll keep coming back to now. But we've got the ingredients, we've got the structure, we've got the data. It's what we do with it that's important, and that's where the Explorer panel comes in. So this events overview is just that. It's an overview on the pages that are getting the most events, the events that we're actually firing, and how those events are formatting. And you can go down and you can assess and review this information. But we will come back shortly to actually the Explore option and look at those events. I want to go through actually creating events and what events actually look like, just as we start to go into creating or the Explore panel itself. So again, if you do have any questions in relation to the general reporting, the top level, leave that with us in the comments. We'll come back to you as soon as we can towards the end of this session when we start looking at the Q&A. So when we have a look at GA4, events and event parameters are one of the key components when it comes to tracking user activity, tracking engagement. Some of these things I've mentioned already. So GA4's new data model is solely based on events and parameters. This idea of events and parameters rather than hits, and that's probably a conversation for another day, get into how Universal Analytics work. But in its essence, it was just a single entry point and a click and a hit each time. Once it hit the last click, that was all captured and that was it done for that session. GA4 is a lot more interactive as it tracks almost everything the user is doing on the page, from their device, their location, to their activity, behavior on site itself, and then allowing us flexibility to create more interactive formats and more interactive reports to look at that information. So events are user interactions or system occurrences. So things like viewing a page, tracking a particular button, a lead generation, button clicks, purchase. There's a plethora of options that are there. We've seen some of them before, the scroll, and we've seen the likes of the form submit. And you can use different tools, and we'll go into some of those tools as well today to see how you can track for some of those events. We then though have event parameters. So event parameters are the detail, and that's important to kind of see that correlation between events and parameters. So parameters are the detail that's captured. So again, what page were they on? That's referred to as page path. So the page address itself or the URL. It could be the product name that they were looking at. It could be the price of the product. It could be the stock of the product, or it could be the content that was on the page. Maybe it was the social media button that they clicked. Event parameters are now where things get dramatically different. Again, previously, for those that were using events and goals in Universal Analytics, you would have had to define your own category, label, and action. That was the way Universal Analytics worked. So if you were wanting to track stock of a product, it would be very hard to use a variable item. You had to put in a label itself, which was manually defined. That often caused problems if you were trying to figure out what people were searching for in the search bar, or maybe you were trying to find out what pages people were searching, but the stock wasn't available. You could do it, but there'd be a lot of custom reporting and filtering you'd have to add. With parameters, you can now effectively tell Google that the event that we're tracking is the product conversion. So we're saying we want to track when someone buys these brown shoes. But what we want to also track on that page is parameters, and we want to track what is the product name that they were looking at when they purchased that, converted that product, and what was the stock of that product. Was it in stock, out of stock? And you can then use that understanding to work out, did we have 80% of our market look at the latest pair of shoes that we added to the site only for 6 weeks of the year to be out of stock? And that's why our conversion was so low. That information is much more accessible now with GA4 than it would have been previously on Universal Analytics. And then GA4, as I mentioned, also has automatic tracking in place. So yes, businesses can still create custom events for specific needs and certain requirements. If you have, again, that free consultation, click the phone number above to find out more. Certainly you can track that. You can use custom events. And we're going to actually hopefully have time today to look at Google Tag Manager and look at how Google Tag Manager can be used to track for custom events. But some of these are options that you can use. So to look at some of the automatically tracked events, and we touched on these earlier, but just to explain again, we have first visit. So this is the unique IP address, so the first time that a user will visit your website, that's then stored in the platform itself. We then have session start, which will be if the user comes back later in the day. So it's a 30-minute period at the moment. Remember, you can change that. So we do have the ability in data stream settings or IP or GTAG configuration to change that. And so session start will be when they start a session after the first visit, and then they possibly come back later in the day, say 30 minutes, for example, that will start a new session. And then finally, we have user engagement, which I mentioned before, is that 10 seconds, 2 visits for conversion tracking. And that's it's really what they've replaced with bounce rate. So again, bounce rate is still accessible, still there, but it's the focus that Google's putting towards now is they're focused more on not people that are leaving your website, but people that are engaging with the content. They're diving in and they're working with the content you have. We then, as we mentioned, have the enhanced measurement where we have the ability to track your scrolls, outbound clicks, site search, video engagement, and more within that as well. From there, then, we want to look at the using GA4 again. So I touched on this briefly before, but just to summarize for you, to give you an idea. So first of all, we have the home page. Now, the home page is that kind of key insights area. It's where we looked at, if I can look at my tabs here, it's where we had that kind of overall view. I honestly don't think it's as good as the dashboard on Universal Analytics. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. I think a lot of people who have opened GA4 for the first time looked at this and went, where is everything? You know, we have some of the information that's there in terms of filtering by dates, but you almost have to go into each of the reports, each of the dashboards to find their own. So the home dashboard is nowhere near as good as it used to be when it came to GA4, or sorry, Universal Analytics over to GA4. We then have reports, and reports is where we touched on again before, but reports allows us to track. So again, we go over to our dashboard. So too many tabs open now, I'm getting lost. So if we go to our reports and we then have a look at that reports dashboard again, we can see the different reports that are available. Now, some things to note as well, and there are changes that are coming already, even in space of time that we've been not only preparing for the webinar, but in our own research and our own development of GA4 is the likes of the reports. So when we look, first of all, at say acquisition, so let's have a look at the overview of user acquisition. So again, acquisition being where is our traffic sourced from. What we can see here is a couple of options on the right-hand side. If we start at the top right-hand side of the screen, we have the date filters, very similar as we had before. So we have the ability to set previous period, certain last number of weeks, days. And again, the compare option is also there. So you can compare it to either previous period, previous month, year, week, or previous quarter. So there's loads of options there when it comes to the result display. Under this, then we then have the ability to edit the likes of comparisons. So we can look at that filtering timeline, as comparing to the last period last week, as I mentioned. We have the ability to share the report. Now, one thing that's actually recently changed, Google almost, I feel like they had this in and it was removed, is automated reporting. Google has not enabled this feature at the moment. So the ability to, previously we were able to set up like a weekly or a monthly report to automatically be sent to a particular email address or user from Universal Analytics. That's not a feature now in GA4. And in fact, Google's just recently made a statement that they want you to use Google Studio to do that. And as a result, you can use Google Studio, you can connect to that to set up automated reporting within GA4. And again, if that's something you'd like to find out more information, do speak to our team. We'd be more than happy to help when it comes to Google Studio setup. So again, we have the ability here to share a link, and we can share that then. It's a read-only link. We can share that with a colleague, a friend, or a family member to have a look at our analytics. We could download this as a PDF or an appropriate file type and then share that with them again for that reference. And then we also have the ability then to add further insights. And this is where, again, that automation, that artificial intelligence is coming in. So insights is still in its base bit at the moment. It's very similar to Universal Analytics Insights, but this does allow you to track for typical information, typical questions that people like to ask to Google when it comes to finding out more about their traffic and how it's performing. So you can click on some of these insights to get quick results back from GA4. And then lastly, we have customized reports. Now, at the moment, customized reports are very simple and in their setup, it allows you to reorganize, but also then you have the ability to add custom cards. Now, at this stage, when we look at path exploration in just a moment, we can then start to create custom events or custom cards, and that will allow us to set up tracking, create custom reports and profiles. So if we're interested, an example is finding out which page is getting the most traffic from which particular source. That's something that's actually very easy to do now in GA4, and we're going to go into that in a moment. So just some of the examples that you can do within GA4 and comes to the reporting profile. When we look again then at other channels or other sources within GA4, it's important to obviously see how those reports can be tracked and obviously what types of engagement features are available, such as adding filters and comparison to different profiles or different pages. Again, these are all things that you can do when it comes to path exploration. We then have explore, and this is something I'm quite interested in at the moment. Exploration or behavior flow, as a lot of people referred to it previously on Universal Analytics, is probably one of the key areas, the key analysis hub, as they're referring to it, is something we really want to get into. And we're going to jump into that now. And we're going to take a look at reporting in GA4 and how you can start to create more accurate reports, more accurate measurements, and how those settings can then be configured. So when we looked already at the data that's available to us, it is top level. We want to try and find out more specific information, like which pages are getting the most traffic from organic, what's getting the most value. And to do that, we want to go to the Explore tab. Now I have, just in case, as ever with webinars, if something was to go wrong, I have done here's one I've done earlier, here's my blue Peter scenario. But what we're going to try and do is have a look at path explorations, and if you're going to set these up yourselves for the first time. So out of the box, there is templates that GA4 comes with. The three that you'll see on screen are actually the best ones to use. I think we have Freeform, which gives us a kind of a very flexible table view, and you can change it, and we'll talk about that. We then have funnel explorations. This is fantastic for e-commerce websites or even service-based websites that have a particular funnel to follow. That could be the e-commerce flow in terms of how users land on the site, engage with the content, add it to the basket, checkout, and so on and so forth. We then have path exploration. This is something we'll come back to, and this allows us to look at behavioral flow, looks at how users navigate the website. And you can look at this from both the start of the journey or also the end of the journey. So if you know that the end of the journey is a contact form and you want to track user progression backwards and see how they got to that stage, you can do that as well. But there's also a massive gallery of other options that you can use within the templates. Again, at the moment, my only use cases have been the top three, but you might find one works best for you. If you're looking at a overall geographic location, you might find something that's good for there. So you can start from a blank template, but I often would recommend that you start with Freeform as an example. Now, Freeform will come pre-populated. And when you look at this for the first time, if you haven't seen this before, it can be a bit of a head melt. So it's something to keep on board with. It is pre-populated, so you will see there's some rows and columns and values already added. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to leave it as it is, but I'm going to delete the data that's in the table. And so what we want to do in this scenario, in this example, is we want to look at the source of our traffic, and we want to see what pages are getting the actual traffic themselves. So what we can start to do here is we have segments, dimensions, and metrics. Now, just to talk us through this before we start to get in, we have, first of all, at the top, we have exploration name. So we can start to name that referral traffic. I think traffic source is what I call the other one. So we'll just say source. We'll leave that. So we've got the actual exploration name. We've got the date filtering that we want to apply for. So we can say that in 7 days, and we can hit apply. And then we have segments. So segments are something you can customize. You can create your own segments, and these can be for audience groups. They can be for past customers. They could be for referral traffic. You can start to kind of group up segments, and that's something you can create new segments by hitting publish. We then have dimensions. Now, dimensions is the actual metric. Dimensions is actually the term that you wish to follow or use. So again, that would be things like page path, town, city, device type, and there's some prefixed ones that are here for us. So if we wanted to track for the events that are on the page, and we'll look at that shortly, we can look at those. Or if we wanted to track the town and city, as we've seen with the demo, we can do that. But what we want to track for is source. So what we'll do here is we'll go to plus for dimensions, and we're going to see that there's a list of predefined dimensions that are actually on GA4 at the moment. So what we can do here, if I move the zoom tab out of the way, just a wee later. Perfect. So what we can do then is we can search for a particular dimension. So what we could do here is we could search for page path. Page path will give us a URL or a page name. And we can see here we have a couple of options. We have custom, and we'll come back to those again. We'll talk about custom events. But here we can select page path and query string. Now, if you hover over this, you'll get a small box that tells you what that actually is. So this is the URL, which is the one that we want. But if you were interested in knowing what screen class is, that's normally to do with a mobile application. So it will still show you the URL for page path, but it will also show you a mobile app too. All we need for now, though, is page path and query string, and we're going to hit import. Now, what we can do with that information then is we can now add that to a row or to a column. Now, I'll be completely honest, even when I do this, I almost kind of set this in place and then see what looks right, what doesn't. So when we add it to the row, nothing's going to happen because we need to track a metric. We need to have a value assigned to it. Now that could be, we want to know the number of active users, which is the one we're going to use. Maybe we want to only know which events are fired, or possibly we'll have to look at transactions. So again, if we had an e-commerce website and we wanted to look at only the transactions versus what pages are getting those transactions, we could do that too. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a value and we're going to add a metric of active users. So what we want to see here, or hopefully what we want to see, is the top performing pages. Now that's the first step here. And that's, again, you're maybe going, well, Stephen, that's pretty much the same thing I could see on the dashboard. Like, okay, so what we want to do now is start to customize this a little further. So what we might want to add in then is the likes of a source. So we could have a look at first user medium and try that and test it first. So let's drag that in to a column across the top. Now, first user medium, remember, will be the group or the source of that traffic, the general top level grouping. So we'll see here again, organic, direct, referral, social. So that's good, but it's maybe not exactly what I'm looking for. So let's see if there's another dimension we can add. So let's go to plus and we will try source. Let's see if there's a source there. So again, there we have source medium. So let's do that. So that's going to give us both. So let's click on source medium and hit import. And again, we can drag that into where we want it to go. So source medium, we'll drag it in and we're just going to press the X beside first user medium, and that will hopefully give us that information. So now we can start to see in the last 7 days what pages and what path is getting most. So we can see some search results in there as well. And we can start to see obviously the source. So we've got again, Google, direct, Facebook, and we can change those timelines around and we can look at different examples there. Just for now, to keep this as quite clean and simple, I'm just going to bring that back to the, what was the one we were using before? First user medium, just to keep that simple. So the first user interaction. And again, we get some information there. What we can also then add in is the likes of event count, and we can drag that in as a value. And now that allows us to see the event that is happening on the page too. So we've got the event count, so the number of events that are happening. And we can also then go a step further and add in things like event name. And this is where I was saying at the very start, where GA4 has much more information. But as you can start to see, you can start to really break this down into a whole different level. So now I can see, and if I add some customization here, so let's increase the number of rows to 25, and let's increase the number of columns along the top to 15. This is going to look a bit mad, but what we can see here then is we have the first user medium, so organic for the first user session with the site. We then can see the event name, so we can start to see the user engagement. We can see their first visit, the session start, the page view, and then we can again see the users themselves. So we can start to break things out. So we might not need event count. Let's see if we can remove that. Yeah, perfect. So we can see session start, first visit. So what we can then see here is in the last 7 days, the Amazing Grace song page on the website has got a total of 909 views. Of those 909 views, we've had 524 conversions or engagements. So we've had 53% engagement rate on that page, which is great. However, if we then start to scroll down, we can look at some pages that aren't getting as much engagement, and that could be down to the traffic. But we can then start to break down and go back and look at some of those pages to see, do we have enough content? Do we have the right content that's answering the helpful questions, so to speak, Google's looking for? And we can use that information to help reinvest back into our website to see if there is challenges or problems. Now, another thing that we can also do then is also add in then filters. Now, filters can then be used to track for particular events. So for example, if we just left click in that filter box, it will give us some suggestions that we can filter by. And so one of them, for example, and hopefully it works for the purpose of the demonstration on the webinar, is the likes of event name. So what we can do with that event name is we can click on event name and we can add a filter. So we want to track for exactly when something exactly matches, and we will try to see, do we have form submit? So if we just click in form, you'll see we have some of the premium options. So there's again some of the events that are, again, they're enhanced measurements. Remember, I haven't had to do anything with those. They're already here. So let's do form submit. And what we can do, all being well, is that if we have any form submissions, we can then start to see, so from organic results, the home page, so as highlighted by the index, so / the home page has had 8 users submitting forms in the last 7 days. And we can then start to see where users are engaging most of the website, what pages are actually getting the most form conversions. So again, 15 attractions or things to do in Budapest is something that's been engaging our audience. People have come in, they've submitted forms on those pages more than some of the others. So again, we can take that filtered information and we could either share it with a colleague, with someone in our team to review that information, maybe pass it back to them and say, here's a list of the top performing pages that are getting the most engagement or getting the most form submissions. Let's get onto those pages. Let's try and double down. Or maybe the opposite. We could look at pages that aren't getting form submissions, maybe aren't getting that love and attention, and start to break that down for them as well. Of course, we can then take that data to a different level and we can export that out of the website. So these are just some examples of reporting, but I encourage you to have a bit of fun with the reports area. Yeah, I know I said have a bit of fun with the explore area, and that's maybe something you're going, oh my goodness, Stephen, definitely not having fun with it, more dreading it. But no, do genuinely get into it, play around with it, have a look at the settings and see what works for you. That's the best way I find to actually really embrace this system, is to try different things, drag in different options for device category, see what information you're looking for. You're almost trying to set out in your head first and see, okay, what are we trying to find? Is it the mobile users? Add it to a row. Does it not look like right in a row? Then move it into a column and see what works best for you and your own filter and your reporting. Being able to see again the breakdown from referral sources, that organic traffic coming from both mobile and desktop. Where's the difference? How do we start to break that down? And that's just one example of path exploration there, but there's other examples that we can use. We have user behavior. And so what we can do here is path exploration, which is the actual behavioral flow. You may have seen it before. So this is a template that I've created before. And what this allows us to do is to track the progress of someone visiting the website. So we have a starting point, which is the event name. So the event name in this case is the first visit. We can see if we hover over this, we have a breakdown for each device type. And that's highlighted by the breakdown here for device category. So we can start to see that 17,000 users in this time period. So in the last month, I think this is so the 23rd of April to the 22nd of May, we can see here that breakdown for mobile, desktop, tablet, and even smart TV. We can then take that a step further and we can have a look at page title. So by default, this would show event name. So it's just going to show you first event, and then it's going to show you things like session start. That's really useless to us. So what we want to do is we want to see the page title and the screen name or the screen class. So what we can do here is we can change that. And now we can see, so the majority of the first visits are landing straight on The Last Kingdom. So we did a blog post on The Last Kingdom, the TV show. And from here, you can see where that traffic's going to. From there, then what we can actually do though is left click on this, and we can actually start to see that flow. We can start to see how users are funneling through the website. Again, really important information, really crucial to understand this so that you can see the actual progression. If you're trying to send people to your services page from your home page, then land on the services page, then you suddenly see the number dramatically drops off. What's happening? Is there a reason for that? And you can actually check that, because what you can do is change this back then to event name. And what that will allow you to see then is the user engagement on that page of the user going through. What's the progression look like? How many are scrolling down, engaging the content? How many are starting to engage in that page? You can really start to break this down further as you go through. How many are scrolling down? What pages are they going to? What level are they going to within the site? And this just allows you to track that conversion through the site itself. The really good thing though about path exploration or behavior flow in GA4 is you have the ability now to completely start again and actually add an endpoint. So what you could say here is you want to know, so if we go to page title and we drop that in at the endpoint, well, what we could do here is, let's say we had a contact page on our website, or we had a particular page we want people to go to. So we'll say our home page is an example. That's probably a bad example. So actually let me change that to an event. So if we go to endpoint and we set an event name, and we set the event name to be form submit. And again, if you had a custom event like book a free consultation, you might want to see what the steps backwards actually looks like. How do people get there? So from what page is getting the conversions, what page is getting that? And we can start to play around with the page title and screen types again. And this allows us to see that transition through the site. The majority of our form start and form submissions are coming from the home page. But then after that, we have those top performing pages that we'd seen before on our previous reports, things like the contact us page, which is natural, and that would be quite obvious, right through to the likes of some of our blog pages for the likes of the Amazing Grace song and travel in Northern Ireland. So it's just some examples of how path exploration, of how exploration can be used within GA4 to a much more refined level. So when it comes to reporting and creating events, one of the really powerful tools that you can use now at your disposal is a platform called Google Tag Manager. And I'd really encourage you, if you haven't already looked into Google Tag Manager, or if you haven't already checked it out, is to have a little look at Google Tag Manager, first of all. There's lots of resources. We will be doing more webinars, more tutorials, more videos on our channels. So do stay tuned for those. But Google Tag Manager is a fantastic platform. I would love to have time today, sadly, I'm watching the clock, but to actually show you how to set up from scratch, but very simply to go into Google Tag Manager and just explain it for you and show you how it can be used. Google Tag Manager, or GTM, is a free resource that Google uses, and this allows you to help track what's referred to as tags and triggers on your website. An example of this is, let's say you want to track a free phone number or a consultation button on your website, maybe a very specific button. What you can do then is you can use Google Tag Manager to apply a tag around that button to say, this is the button I want you to watch. If someone triggers it, so clicks it or views it for a certain amount of time, you customize this, we'll show you in a second, you can then get an event to be created in GA4. And this is massive for Universal Analytics, it's massive for GA4 because it allows you to set up custom events. And these custom events will give you a much clearer or much better understanding of your conversions and what people are actually doing on your website. So again, if you're thinking that the enhanced measurement is all you need, Google Tag Manager might not be an option, but it's still great to know that it's there, that if there is a particular thing that you add later on, an event, a service that you add to your website, this is Google Tag Manager and it can be waiting there for you. So as I mentioned, Google Tag Manager allows you to streamline that process. The wonderful thing about Google Tag Manager is that as soon as you've added the tag, so it gives you 2 bits of code to add to the website. Once again, there's plugins on a lot of these builders, but as soon as you add that code to the website, it will allow you to implement these tags without the need to know or code anything on the site. You might need to know how to look at code and see what's there, but this will allow you to actually track for particular events that are being fired without the need for you to go into your website and start coding things out. It also allows you to tag for various examples. So if you're using like Google AdWords, if you're using Google Analytics, you'll be able to track that information together under one roof. The key benefit of using Google Tag Manager with GA4 is that advanced custom event tracking and custom dimensions. Now, there is a different level this could go to, and I don't want to, if I haven't already, I don't want to tip anyone else over the edge today for this webinar, but we do want to obviously explore those options with that advanced tracking that's available with Google Tag Manager. So setting up Google Tag Manager, how do you get started with that? Well, hopefully, if this demo works for us, okay, we've already got Conley Cove set up. But for those that haven't set up Google Tag Manager before, it's very simple. Just go to Google search results, type in Google Tag Manager, and you can get started, hit sign in. And as long as you have a Google account, you can create an account for free. Now, when you open Google Tag Manager, you will have the ability to create a new account. You can left click on create new account and start to fill out the details. It's very simple to set up. The only bit that's a bit more advanced, depending on how much access you have to your own website, is the code. There's 2 pieces of code you need to add. There's one to the head of the website, which will track all of your core pages. And there's one code then for the body, and that will allow you to track into your events and tags that fire on each specific page. Really important that you set this up correctly, because making a mistake on this might result in incorrect or invalid data being sent back to Google Tag Manager and to GA4. Now, your measurement ID is really important when you set this up. Now, for those that maybe weren't here at the start, or maybe have already forgotten about measurement ID, don't be alarmed. Our measurement ID can be found in GA4. If we go down to the bottom left corner, we go to admin and we go to data streams, and then left click on our web stream, you will see our measurement ID on the right-hand side. Now, that's important to remember because that will be used by Google Tag Manager to link GA4 to Google Tag Manager. So if we just go back to our Google Tag Manager, we'll go back to our Blue Peter stunt of here's one we've done earlier, and we can click on Conley Cove. Now, for those that are using or have used Google Tag Manager before, even on Universal Analytics, there will be a couple of things even you will be able to learn from this as well and change. So to give you a bit of a run through on Google Tag Manager, it's actually very easy once you start to understand where things are located. So at the top, we have the workspace, we have the versions, which allows you to see the history and the changes that's been done and by who. And we then have the admin console, which allows you to see the users that are added. In the workspace, then, I would often recommend just using one workspace. If you're going to get more advanced, you can create different ones for all different levels, but that's a whole different conversation. So keep it in the workspace for now. We have the overview, which is quite simply an overview. It just shows you what tags have been created recently, is there anything in place at the moment, and what's the latest version that was done. We then have the ability to create tags, and we're going to have a look at those. And those tags, as you'll see, are really important to allow us to create custom events. We then have triggers. Now, triggers are used to fire a tag. So a trigger is effectively just what trips it off. So is it a click? Is it a form submission? Is it a particular event, like staying on a page 30 seconds or scrolling down maybe 50% instead of 90%? These are some of the triggers that you can use. We then have variables. Variables are just the data that's actually collected. Now, when you set up a new Google Tag Manager account, you might want to click on configure, and some marketeers, some other people may have me shot for saying this, but I would normally just go and tick them all, just so at least you know you have them there. There's some that I know definitely won't need, like history and error logs. But an example of this would be if you're running e-commerce websites and you want to track for failed payments. Let's say, for example, that people keep going to the checkout, you're seeing great conversion in the behavioral flow, people on the checkout, but you're not seeing the conversion, you're not seeing, you know, there's something wrong. Well, you would actually want to use error message. So you could actually have a trigger set that says, if a certain error message is fired, fire an event back to GA4, and then I can run a report to see how many events with error messages are sent back. So I'm just trying to make this a bit closer to home to explain why some of these things may or may not be needed. For a website like mine, don't really need error messages. I'm more just tracking things like social shares or messages there. Although that being said, I could use them to track for if a form couldn't submit because someone forgot to type in their email address in the correct case, or did something silly with the form and it didn't fire for whatever reason. So these are just some things that you can do. So Google Tag Manager out of the box will have a handful in here. I'd recommend you just tick these all on because you'll probably use some of them at least for tracking page links or URLs. And so that's just like a quick wee tip that you can use. And those are the three kind of key areas you're going to be involved here: tags, triggers, and variables. Now, once you've got Google Tag Manager connected to your site, the first thing you're going to want to do is create a tag for a GA4 configuration. And this just effectively tells Google Tag Manager to effectively trigger on all pages on the website, which you'll see here. And we can create this very easily just by going to new. And what you'll do here is you can call this whatever you'd like. So you can call this GA4 setup or configuration, whatever's convenient. The naming is really for internal purposes. It's these two boxes that are important. So you've set up your Google Tag Manager, you've added your code. This is the first thing you're going to do. So forget about everything that's on my screen. Don't let that put you off. Just go straight to tags. Once you've done your variables and ticked your boxes, go straight to tags and set up the first tag. So tag configuration, and you'll see it's already set up for you. Now, I didn't need to do anything here. It's just GA4 configuration, and there is your measurement ID. Paste that in from GA4. And as soon as you've done that, and you've obviously gone through triggering in a second here, that will at least now link Google Tag Manager to your GA4. And you can test all these in just a moment. So once you've done that, paste in your measurement ID, go to triggering and just set the first one. Again, it's here by default. Don't worry about everything else you see on my screen. Just go straight to all pages and click on that trigger. Now, whenever you hit save, and obviously I've got one set up, so I don't need to hit save, but now whenever you hit save, that will now start to track across the breadth of your site on all pages. So at least Google Tag Manager will be linked together. Now, where things get a bit more exciting with Google Tag Manager is now the ability to create custom events. Now, the way this works is you want to create a custom event first in Google Tag Manager. So for example, if we looked at Conley Cove as an example, I've created an event for tracking the likes of Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I want to see how many people are clicking on Facebook and social share, and they're sharing that content on our blog posts. So in order to do that, what I can do is within Google Tag Manager, I can create a new tag. Now, again, here's one we've done earlier, but to show you how I did this. So the first thing that I did is I went to new. I then call this Facebook share or social share on Facebook. So it's not really too important again. So Facebook share. And this again is where things get important. So tag configuration. And when you know it, there's one set up for us, which is great. So GA4 event, we're going to left click on that and we're going to select the configuration. So remember, that's the thing we've just done. That's the GA4 configuration. So if you called yours something different, if you said GA4 setup, it'll be called GA4 setup in here. So you can just add that in there. We then want to give this an event name. Now, the event name is important. There is a series of parameters that you can use. There's a series of recommended event names that Google have, and you can click on the Learn More button to find out about those. And now, if you create a custom event, and this maybe gets a bit more advanced, it doesn't exist already in Google, you'll need to create a custom dimension. Whole different conversation, but it's something just to consider. So if you are going through this, do use the Learn More feature and use the event names that already exist. This will just help Google actually be able to translate what you've set up. So there's a whole table here of things that you can do, from purchase to login, for payment information for certain events. There's plenty of kind of recommended events that you can use that you can access on the site. So do have a way look into that. But just for this example, if I go back to Google Tag Manager, we can add an event name and we can say FB_click. So that's Facebook click. And then from there, we could add a parameter. So remember, a parameter is the detail. So we might want to know, for instance, the page. So we could say page path, and the value, we can just hit the plus button. So there is some that's pre-made. As I mentioned already, there's a wee brick builder here, and this allows you to search for ones that already exist. So we could look down here for page path. So we could say page path or page URL, both one and the same, I suppose. And we can put that in. So now that value will be dynamic. So the idea here is that if someone clicks on Facebook click, or they click on the social share for Facebook, we will then be able to have a parameter. So this again is, remember, for those reports. So whenever we look at the Explorer later on, we can then run an event for the path, the page that they were on when they clicked. And the value then, what gets put in brackets, will just be the link effectively gets sent out. What we then need to set in is what is going to trigger that event to fire, what is going to make Facebook click fire. And this is where we can then set a trigger. And here we can either choose one that we've already done. So again, I've set one up. But what we could do then is we could go to plus and we can create a new trigger. So in this case, we're going to create a new trigger and we're just going to call this Facebook click. Sure, click maybe. And again, trigger configuration. What that will allow us to do is set what is going to trigger this event. Now, just to show you, you can also add in other trigger events. You can add in things like page view. So if someone's used a particular page, you can obviously trigger that. You can set it so that when someone clicks on all elements or just clicks on some elements, you can trigger on a certain page there, and that can support you with engagement rate behind that. Or you also have others for engagement. Now, things like form submission, scroll depth, you'll be familiar with those. You would have seen those under enhanced measurement. What you can do though with Google Tag Manager is customize them. So if you wanted an event to fire when someone got to 50% of the page rather than the 90%, then you could set that in here. Likewise, if someone's watched only the first quarter of a YouTube video, the first 2 seconds, 30 seconds, you could set that in here as a trigger. And likewise, if you wanted someone to be on the page for a certain amount of time, specifically 30 seconds, you could set that as a timer. And lastly, you can also group things together. So if you wanted someone to scroll down the page 50%, click on a particular link, and also then spend at least 60 seconds on the page, you could then group those together through the actual triggered groups. So that's an option too. But for the purpose of this, we just want to do just links. Now, example here for yourself and your own business might be a phone number or an email address. And it's super easy to do this because all you would do is you would say trigger on just links and only fire on some link clicks. Now, what you can then do is effectively set what's it going to be looking for, what's it's actually tracking. Now, if you're familiar with a bit of code, for those that have done a bit of coding before, at least know how to inspect a website, you could right click on something, left click on inspect, and find out the class, so the actual the HTML class or the CSS class that's used. A bit more advanced, don't want to kind of go for this too much, but for those that are maybe not sure how to do that, maybe just want to track general things, well, what you can actually do is you can say click text or click URL. Now, what this would allow us to do is actually set, for example, a link. So if we were to go on to Facebook and we were just to copy that link on this particular page, and I note it would only track the things to do in Tyrone as an example. But if we were to go back to this and paste that link in, then what we're going to tell Google Tag Manager to do is that if anyone goes on to things to do in Tyrone and clicks on that specific URL, it will then fire that tag. Now, you can do this and you can be smart around this as well. If it's a phone number, for instance, you could just do tell. So that's the code that Google will use, or the code your HTML hopefully will have for a telephone link. Or you could say if the actual page, the actual text says 028956550 or whatever it is, then it's going to track everywhere on the website that has that number, and it's going to fire an event every time you click that. So that's just an example how you can set up tags without kind of going overboard. As I said, we could do a whole webinar alone on Google Tag Manager and how to set it up. But that's just to give you a bit of an insight. Now, what you can then do is once you've got your tag set up, so in this case, here's the ones we have earlier set up. So we have Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. What we can then do is go to preview. And what preview will allow us to do is test this almost if we were a live user. So what we can do, or a live user, should I say? So we could copy this link. We could go to our Google Tag Manager preview assistant. So in here, and we just paste that in and hit connect. What this will then do is almost open a debug view of the website. And you'll notice it's in debug mode because there's this bar that loads at the bottom, so called Tag Assistant. So now if we were to scroll down the page and we clicked on the likes of Facebook, you don't need to actually open Facebook, but just click on it for now. Do the same for the likes of Twitter. And then if we wanted to scroll down to the bottom, we could fill out a contact form, we could fill out our email address and hit subscribe. Again, close those up. What we can then do is finish with the tag assistant. So it's almost like browsing the website like normal. And if we then go back to our page, we will now be able to see which tags were fired. We can see that our GA4 configuration tag was fired, and then we told it to fire on all the pages. We can then see our Facebook tag was fired, our Twitter tag was fired. I don't think I actually clicked LinkedIn, so that's also accurate as well. And so when those tags are then fired, that's great. We can see that our tags are working. We can see that the information is tracking. So what we need to do next is we need to go back to our analytics and we need to create custom events. And that's where Google looks at creating those custom events within GA4. Now, there's 101 different ways to do this. There's different methods you can do. But what we would recommend is that when you go into GA4, so if we take a step backwards, well, what we can do now is actually go to events and we can start to create a custom event. Now, for the purpose of this, we're not going to go into creating custom events today in this session, because I've just noticed I'm running out of time and I want to leave time for a Q&A at the end. But if you do have any questions or you'd like to take it to the next level when it comes to creating events and tracking events against conversions, we would love to hear your feedback from today's webinar as well. We're very conscious of making sure we answer as many questions as we can, but also give you the right advice for the right time. Event tracking, Google Tag Manager is one of the key things that I'd love to have more time to go into. And as I said, if you do have feedback for us on today's webinar, any thoughts or comments of your own, or would possibly just like to know more about how GA4 can be used for your business or Google Tag Manager, we'd love to hear from you.